They say every family hides a secret. Mine just happened to unravel not in a whisper, but on the loudest, most expensive night of my sister's life, her wedding. Imagine the shimmering white dress, the crystal glasses, and me, sat deliberately by the hallway, right next to the overflowing trash bin. That stench of stale champagne and rejection became the moment I stopped being the silent, easy one and started being the mirror they never wanted to look into. What followed wasn't a petty act of revenge, it was a painful, necessary awakening. And I promise you, this is the family story you won't be able to turn away from.
Before we begin this story, let me know where you are listening from in the comments below.
My name is Emily. I'm 33 years old, and what I'm about to tell you today will forever change the way you see your own family. They say family is where you belong, where someone saves you a seat and calls your name with warmth. But that night, at my sister's wedding, my seat was by the emergency exit, next to the trash bin. The chair wobbled under me, dressed in white linen that couldn't hide the flaw. My name card, Emily Walker, sat upright, neat, unnecessary. From inside the ballroom came the hum of celebration, laughter, toasts, glasses clinking, music pulsing through the walls. I sat alone, gripping a glass of champagne until my knuckles turned white. The rim trembled against my lip, but I couldn't make myself drink. The door was half open. Through the slit of light, I could see the glow of chandeliers and the shimmer of sequined dresses. The scent of peonies and perfume drifted toward me, blending with the faint metallic tang of the hallway air. The contrast was sharp. Warmth and applause inside, silence and shadows where I sat. "Please, honey, don't make a scene," my mother had whispered earlier, straightening my dress. "It's your sister's big day." Her voice wasn't harsh, just tired, the kind of exhaustion that came from years of managing two daughters who had never truly fit beside each other. "It's fine," I'd said. It was automatic. My lifelong response? "It's fine." Now, sitting there, the words echoed back like a lie I'd told too often. Inside, the DJ called names I didn't recognize, the golden ones who mattered tonight. I could almost picture Olivia, radiant, flawless Olivia, laughing beneath the chandelier. She had always been the star, and I, the silence that followed her. She drew attention like sunlight. I existed in her shade. I used to think being quiet made me peaceful, maybe even good. But tonight, sitting by the door, I realized silence was just another kind of disappearance. The hallway light flickered above me, humming like a tired secret. I looked at the trash bin beside my chair. Crumpled napkins, a lipstick-stained straw, a white rose wilted and discarded. Too symbolic to ignore. Someone brushed past me on their way outside, murmuring, "Oh, sorry, didn't see you there." Didn't see me. Story of my life. The ballroom door opened wider for a moment, and applause poured out. Mark's voice rose above the noise. Charming, confident, thanking the guests for coming, praising my parents for raising such a wonderful woman. Such a wonderful one. Singular. I waited for someone to step into the hallway and say, "Emily, come in, it's family time." No one did. The door closed. The music returned. I pressed my back to the cool wall, eyes stinging from the brightness I wasn't allowed into. I felt invisible in my own bloodline, a ghost dressed for a wedding. For a moment, I imagined walking out that exit door. The Vermont air would be freezing, clean, honest. Maybe I'd drive until the songs on the radio stopped hurting. Maybe I'd finally know what it felt, like not to wait for someone to notice I was gone, but I didn't move. I never did. I caught my reflection in a narrow mirror by the wall, my hair pinned neatly, my lipstick unbroken, my face calm. But my eyes betrayed me. They held the dull shimmer of someone used to shrinking herself to fit small spaces. The champagne in my glass had gone flat. Tiny bubbles clung to the rim and died before they reached the surface. I watched them, realizing I'd been doing the same thing, rising, almost, then fading before anyone noticed. I closed my eyes for a moment and heard a familiar song from inside, one Olivia and I used to dance to as kids in our living room. For a heartbeat, I was 12 again, spinning barefoot beside her, laughing until we fell onto the carpet. Back then, she didn't need an audience. Back then, I belonged. But memories have sharp edges. When I opened my eyes, all I saw was the hallway and the life that had quietly erased me. The door opened again, and Mom appeared, peeking through. "You're okay, right?" she asked softly. I nodded. "Of course." She looked relieved, like my answer was a gift. She squeezed my arm gently and slipped back inside, the door closing on her perfume. I exhaled. The silence pressed heavier this time, not empty, weighted. I could hear my pulse in my ears. That's when the thought hit me, quiet but solid. Maybe this seat wasn't a mistake. Maybe it was a mirror. It showed me exactly where I stood in this family, near enough to the light to feel its heat, but never close enough to be warmed by it. I stayed there a while, letting the laughter ebb and flow. Every time the door opened, the brightness washed over me, then faded. The pattern felt familiar, a rhythm I'd lived my entire life. People would remember this wedding for its perfection. The flowers, the vows, the music. They wouldn't remember the girl sitting by the hallway holding her breath through the applause. But I would. Because that chair, that cold stretch of tile beside the exit door, was where something inside me began to shift. Not loud, not angry, just a quiet realization, settling deep into my bones. I've spent my life disappearing to keep the peace. And maybe tonight, for the first time, I'm done being invisible. When people looked at us growing up, they saw harmony. Two sisters who looked alike, who shared everything from toys to birthdays, who smiled on cue for every photograph. What they didn't see was how often I stood slightly to the side, just far enough to be cropped out later. Olivia was the golden child. She didn't have to work for love. She simply was it. Her laughter filled rooms, her confidence drew attention, her mistakes became stories people laughed about instead of judged. She glowed, and everyone wanted to be close enough to catch the light. And me? I was the calm after her storms, the reliable one, the peacekeeper, the daughter who never made things harder. Let Olivia go first. She's older, sweetheart. You're such an easy girl, Emily. They meant it kindly, but it wasn't kindness I heard. It was instruction. I learned early that being easy was the price of being loved. I remember one night, I must have been 9, sitting on the stairs, hugging my knees while my parents talked in the kitchen. Dad said, "Emily's doing fine on her own." Mom sighed, "I just wish she'd be more like Olivia." The words floated up the hallway like smoke. They didn't sound cruel, they sounded certain. Certain that I was the one who needed less. Certain that Olivia was the one worth worry. That was the night I stopped asking for things. After that, I became the quiet background character in my own home. Olivia got the piano lessons, the praise, the celebration. I got the scraps of their attention, polite smiles, quick hugs, and the kind of love that didn't require effort. When Olivia came home late, there were lectures followed by forgiveness. When I got good grades, there was no need to discuss it. "Of course you did," Dad would say, already turning back to his laptop. I told myself it was fine. I told myself being invisible was noble, that peace was better than conflict. But deep down, I was just practicing how to disappear gracefully. When Olivia left for college, the house felt strange. Mom cried for weeks, her absence echoing through every room. Dad texted her daily. I stayed home, cooked dinner, kept things steady. No one noticed that my silence wasn't strength. It was survival. After college, I moved to Portland. I took a job at the library, surrounded by shelves and the hum of quiet. I liked it there. Books didn't interrupt, didn't compare, didn't forget. People said I had the perfect temperament for the job. Calm, reliable, self-contained. I took it as praise. But sometimes when I caught my reflection in the glass doors at closing time, I saw what I'd really become. A woman living a life small enough not to disturb anyone. 3 years ago, I went home for Christmas. The house looked exactly the same. Garlands, candles, too much decoration, as if holiday cheer could fix what time had worn down. But now, Olivia's presence filled every wall. Her engagement portraits, her graduation photos, her smile immortalized in glossy frames. My picture, one from my college graduation, was half hidden behind a vase of plastic roses. While dusting the shelves, I found a leather-bound book wedged between old cookbooks. Family Notes, 2018, written in my mother's handwriting. I sat on the rug and opened it. Page after page, Olivia. Olivia's first recital. Olivia's first crush. Olivia's first heartbreak. She's so brave. There were ribbons taped to the corners, old birthday cards, even a drawing Olivia made at 6 years old. The handwriting was soft, loving, proud. And then, my name. Emily started school. Emily doing fine. Fine. Always fine. I flipped faster. More of the same. Olivia's milestones, her laughter, her world, and my quiet one-line cameos. Toward the end, I found blank pages, clean, untouched, waiting for stories no one had cared to write. The room tilted slightly. The light from the window caught the gold edges of the pages, and I thought, this is what absence looks like. I didn't cry. The sadness was too old, too woven into my bones. I just sat there, running my fingers over the paper, wondering how many times I had excused being forgotten as being fine. I put the journal back exactly where I found it. That night, lying in my old bed beneath the floral quilt Mom refused to throw away, I stared at the ceiling and made a promise to myself, a quiet, trembling one. Never again would I shrink to keep the peace. Never again would I let being easy mean being invisible. But the truth is, love complicates everything. Even after finding that journal, I didn't leave. I still came home for holidays, still smiled through dinners, still listened to Mom talk about Olivia's job, her wedding, her house, her life, because I still loved them. Because part of me still hoped that love might eventually make them see me. Then, one afternoon, the wedding invitation came. Ivory card, gold lettering, perfect calligraphy. You are joyfully invited to the marriage of Olivia Walker and Mark Hayes. I held it in my hands for a long time. The easy answer was no. Why put myself through it again? But that small, stubborn voice inside, the one I'd tried to bury, said yes. Go. Be seen. Even if they don't notice. So I went. And that's how I found myself sitting by the hallway door that night. The forgotten daughter, back in her rightful place. Watching Olivia shine beneath the chandelier, hearing laughter spill from the ballroom, I realized something I hadn't before. She hadn't taken anything from me. They had given it to her. And I had helped them do it. Every time I said, "It's fine." Every time I smiled instead of speaking. Every time I convinced myself that being overlooked was better than being a burden. The truth is, Olivia didn't forget me. They all did. Because I taught them how. The journal hadn't erased me. I had erased myself. Line by line, year by year, until there was nothing left to write. And sitting there that night, outside the ballroom filled with music and light, I finally understood what being the forgotten daughter really meant. It wasn't that they stopped seeing me, it was that, somewhere along the way, I had stopped seeing myself. The winter it happened was brutal, the kind that froze the air mid-breath and made every sound sharper. Portland looked gray and distant from my window, the streets glistening with melted snow. I had gone 3 days without opening the curtains. Maybe I was afraid of the light. That journal had followed me home from Vermont, not physically, but in thought. Every night since Christmas I saw it when I closed my eyes. The blank pages, the curve of my mother's handwriting, the quiet certainty of being unrecorded. It wasn't anger that stayed with me. It was absence. Some people think heartbreak comes from what's said. For me, it came from what wasn't. From the spaces between their sentences. From the silences that had shaped me. 3 months later, while cleaning out a box of old papers, I found something that made my hands tremble. A letter from my mother, written years ago and never mailed, addressed to Olivia, for when you move out. I almost set it aside, but curiosity won. Her handwriting was softer than I remembered. Each line shimmered with love. "You've always made us proud," she'd written. "No matter what, you'll always be the heart of this family." The heart. I folded the letter carefully and stared at the empty space where my name would have been if I'd ever inspired words like those. I don't know what I expected that day. A revelation, maybe. What I got instead was something colder. Clarity. I wasn't part of the story they told about themselves. That realization lingered like a bruise. It didn't fade. A week later, while visiting my parents again, I found myself standing in front of the same bookshelf. The journal was still there, untouched, as if waiting. I pulled it out, the leather creaking softly, and sat cross-legged on the carpet again. The same spot, the same quiet. I opened it. The pages hadn't changed. Still Olivia, always Olivia. But this time I noticed something I hadn't before. In the back cover pocket was a small envelope, yellowed and sealed. It wasn't labeled. I hesitated, then tore it open. Inside was a photograph, Olivia and me as kids, maybe 6 and 9, sitting on a swing set in the backyard. She was laughing, her hair flying in the wind. I was behind her, pushing her gently, smiling faintly at the camera. On the back, written in my mother's looping script, were 5 words. "Emily always helps her sister." I stared at it for a long time. The sentence was meant as love, I could feel that. But it was also the summary of my entire existence. I wasn't in the story. I was for it. A supporting character. The helper. The steady one. I slipped the photo back into the pocket and closed the journal. I didn't cry. I just sat still until the sound of the furnace humming filled the room. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake listening to the creak of the house, the faint wind outside the window. The journal sat on my nightstand, heavy with everything it didn't say. Around 2 in the morning, I got up. I opened it again and flipped to one of the blank pages. The paper felt thick under my fingers. Smooth. Expectant. For a moment, I thought about writing something, about filling that emptiness. But what would I even say? That I'd been good? Quiet? Forgettable? That I'd been the keeper of secrets no one asked me to hold? Instead, I wrote one line. Just one. I was here too. Then I closed the book and put it back where I found it. The next morning, the house was full of voices. Olivia on the phone, Mom humming in the kitchen, Dad reading the paper. The same rhythms. The same choreography of a family pretending balance. Over breakfast, Mom asked, "You'll come to the wedding, right?" Her tone was casual, but there was something underneath. An expectation that I would. "Of course," I said, stirring my coffee. "Wouldn't miss it." And I meant it, though not for the reasons she thought. I wasn't going for Olivia. I wasn't even going for them. I was going for me. to see how far I could stand in that house of mirrors before disappearing again. As the months passed, I tried to bury the memory of that journal, but it lived quietly in me. It followed me through my workdays, through the hush of the library aisles, through every conversation that brushed against the word family. Then one day, as I was closing up at the library, an older patron came to return a stack of books. On top was a worn copy of Letters to My Daughter by Maya Angelou. She smiled at me and said, "That one saved me once." After she left, I opened it to a random page. The line I landed on read, "You may not control all the events that happen to you, but you can decide not to be reduced by them." I stood there, holding the book against my chest, letting the words sink in. That was the moment I knew I couldn't keep living in the margins. When the wedding came, I booked my flight without hesitation. I told myself it was just another family event, but deep down, I knew better. This was my reckoning. The journal had been a warning, a mirror showing me what silence becomes when you feed it too long. If I didn't speak, if I didn't exist out loud, I'd end up as another blank page in someone else's book. That thought terrified me more than confrontation ever could. So I packed my bags and left for Vermont. The journal still in its place on the shelf, but its echo heavy in my suitcase. As the plane lifted through the clouds, I watched the city disappear below me and whispered to myself, almost like a prayer, "I was here. I am here. And they're going to know it." The morning of the wedding was bone cold, the kind that turned every breath into fog. From my hotel window, Vermont looked like a painting. White fields, slow snow, a silence that felt too clean to be real. I stared out for a while, wondering if peace could ever feel this quiet inside me. Olivia's wedding day, the day my family had dreamed of, and the one I'd dreaded without knowing why. The moment I arrived at the venue, warmth hit me like perfume. Roses, champagne, and 1,000 tiny lights. Everything gleamed, gold chairs, white tablecloths, the soft hum of perfection. It was exactly the kind of beauty that demanded you not touch it, not ruin it with real feelings. "Emily!" Mom called across the lobby, her voice bright but strained. She looked stunning, hair perfectly set, eyes gleaming with anxious joy. "You made it." "I said I would," I replied, smiling the polite smile I'd perfected over the years. She reached for my arm, brushing imaginary lint from my sleeve. "You look lovely, sweetheart. I'll tell the planner to seat you. There were a few last-minute changes, but there's a place for you near the back, until—" She hesitated, like saying it might bruise her tongue. "Until they open another table. Near the back." I nodded. "That's fine." It was always fine. The ballroom was breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers scattered light like broken glass. Music drifted soft and romantic through the speakers. Then, there she was. Olivia. The bride. A vision in white silk and calm perfection. When she spotted me, her face brightened. "You came," she said, her voice that same airy sweetness that could make strangers adore her in seconds. "I said I would." She hugged me lightly, careful not to wrinkle her dress. "You look beautiful." And just like that, she was gone again. Absorbed by photographers, bridesmaids, and endless congratulations, I found my table. Not quite in the ballroom, not quite out of it. A perfect metaphor. The catering doors opened and closed beside me, carrying laughter, the smell of roast beef, and waiters' hurried footsteps. I wrapped my fingers around a cold glass of water and just watched. Through the glass wall, Olivia stood beneath the chandeliers, her veil glowing like frost. Cameras flashed. Every time she turned her head, applause followed. The air around her shimmered with attention. And for the first time, I didn't feel jealousy, only recognition. Olivia wasn't glowing. She was performing. The slight tremor in her smile gave her away. The way she kept glancing toward Mom for approval, like a child waiting to be told she was enough. Maybe she was as trapped by this story as I'd been. The wedding planner passed by. Young, crisp suit. Headset on. Miss Walker? Hallway seating, correct? The words hit harder than they should have. Hallway seating. It sounded like a sentence. Yes, I said quietly. That's me. He nodded, satisfied, and hurried away. The ceremony began soon after. Guests rose as Olivia walked down the aisle on Dad's arm. The room glowed with camera flashes, gasps, and that collective sigh people make when witnessing something they believe in. I stood too, hands clasped, throat tight. I didn't cry. I didn't even breathe deeply. I just watched, steady and still, the way I'd always done. When she passed my row, her eyes met mine. For a second, she looked almost afraid, like she'd seen someone she used to know. Then she looked away. Mark's voice trembled slightly as he said his vows. Olivia's were flawless. Her words were like her. Polished, rehearsed, perfect. When they kissed, the applause rose like thunder, shaking the glasses on my table. I clapped too, my palms tingling from the sound. Later, during the reception, I escaped toward the corridor. The noise of the ballroom faded behind me, replaced by the hum of fluorescent lights and the faint chill of the hallway. Through the glass door, I could still see Olivia. Her dress shimmered as she danced with Mark. She smiled, laughed, leaned into him, her every move graceful and light. But I saw it now. The small cracks in her perfection. The way she inhaled sharply when the song changed. The way her shoulders dropped when she thought no one was looking. She wasn't free either. We just carried different cages. For a long moment I stood there, watching her spin beneath the chandeliers. She was the bride, adored, envied, photographed. But the light she lived in was harsh. I'd spent my whole life believing she cast my shadow. Now I saw it clearly. I'd built my own. I turned to the mirror beside the exit. My reflection looked back, calm, tired, but awake in a way it hadn't been in years. Behind me, Olivia's laughter echoed through the door, bright and distant. She was the bride in white, and I was the sister in shadow. But for the first time, the shadow felt like mine. A place I chose, not one I'd been pushed into. I adjusted my dress, straightened my shoulders, and stepped back toward the door. The night air brushed cool against my face, carrying the sound of celebration. Somewhere inside, people would toast and dance, and Olivia would keep shining. That was her story. Mine was just beginning. The music shifted to something slower. A romantic song meant to soften the edges of champagne and small talk. Laughter swelled, silverware clinked, cameras flashed. From my corner by the hallway, it looked like everyone in that ballroom was wrapped in a dream. Everyone except me. I sat there, back straight, pretending to listen to the rhythm of a life I'd long stopped belonging to. My half-empty glass of wine caught the reflection of the lights. Fractured, trembling. That's when I saw her. Olivia, moving through the crowd like she was made of light. Her gown trailed behind her like a second skin, her face glowing with that effortless charm that always drew people near. Mark followed closely, smiling the way men smile when they're trying too hard to look in love. Then, for a split second, her eyes met mine. Something flickered. Not recognition, more like discomfort. She whispered something to Mark, placed her glass on a table, and began walking toward me. Each click of her heels on the marble floor sounded like a countdown. When she stopped in front of me, her perfume filled the air. Jasmine and something expensive. Something sharp. Her lips curled into that familiar half-smile, the kind that could be mistaken for affection if you didn't know her as I did. "You look cozy out here," she said, voice soft but pointed. I laughed once, quiet, measured. You always did have the best seat, Liv. I thought I'd give you the spotlight. Her smile didn't falter, but her eyes narrowed slightly. You could have joined us. No one told you to sit here. Didn't they? The air between us tightened. She shifted, adjusting her dress as if that could buy her time. I wanted tonight to be perfect, she said. You being tense doesn't help. Tense? I repeated. I'm not tense. Just observant. Her brow furrowed. Emily, please. It's my wedding. Can we not do this? Do what? I asked. Acknowledge we're not as perfect as everyone thinks? Her jaw stiffened. You always twist things. And you always pretend not to understand them, I said quietly. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The muffled thump of music leaked from the ballroom, a soundtrack for our silence. Olivia crossed her arms, eyes glinting. You know, you could be happy for me. Just once. I am, I said. Truly. I just wish you knew what happiness actually feels like, not what it looks like on camera. That hit. I saw it in the way her expression flickered before she could fix it. She took a step closer, lowering her voice. Why do you always make me the villain? You chose this, Em. The quiet life. The distance. You could have been anything, gone anywhere, but you hide behind your, I'm fine. Don't blame me for that. Her words were sharp, practiced. They might have even been true once, but not anymore. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping the floor. For the first time, I was eye level with her, the glitter of her gown reflecting faintly against my skin. There's always been room for both of us, Liv, I said evenly. But you never wanted to share it. You needed to be higher, even if it meant pushing someone else lower. She blinked, something almost like guilt flashing in her eyes. Then she laughed softly, bitterly. You're so dramatic. You make everything sound poetic when it's just resentment. I tilted my head, studying her. You know what's poetic? The fact that you don't even see what this is. It's not about who got more attention. It's about who got believed. You've always needed to perform for love. And I let you. Because I thought maybe that made me good. Emily, she began, but I didn't stop. Mark's not your salvation, Liv. He's just another stage light. You don't even see that the more you chase approval, the more you become what you think they want. You're not even you anymore. You're decoration. Her eyes darkened. How dare you? I dare, I said simply, because it's true. For a heartbeat, she didn't move. Her breathing quickened, shallow, controlled. Then, without a word, she reached for the glass on my table and took a sip. The tiniest gesture of defiance. You always think you're the only one who's been hurt, she whispered. But you're not. You're just the only one who never forgave. I almost laughed. Forgive what, Olivia? Being erased? The words hung between us, heavy and sharp. Her mask slipped, just a little. I saw the exhaustion beneath her beauty, the cracks in her confidence. She set the glass down too hard, the stem shattering against the table. The sound sliced through the air like a small private explosion. For a second, we both stared at the fragments. Not this time, I murmured. Her lips parted, as if to respond, but I was already turning away. My heart was pounding, but not from anger, from relief. Behind me, Olivia's voice wavered, barely audible over the music. You think you're free now? You're not. You'll always be chasing something to make you feel real. I paused at the doorway and looked back. Maybe, I said, but at least I'm not pretending anymore. Her face tightened, proud, wounded, and human all at once. For the first time, I saw not the golden girl, but a woman terrified of being ordinary. Then I walked away. The hallway stretched ahead, dimly lit, quiet. My heels clicked against the tile like punctuation marks at the end of a chapter. Somewhere behind me, laughter erupted again, the party resuming, as if nothing had happened. The music grew louder, the applause brighter. But for the first time that night, the sound didn't sting. I pressed my palm against the cool wall, closed my eyes, and breathed in deeply. The air smelled faintly of wine and winter. My pulse steadied. For years I'd believed speaking the truth would destroy something. Her, us, maybe even myself. But standing there, surrounded by silence, I realized the truth hadn't destroyed anything. It had just made space. And maybe that was the beginning of freedom. After Olivia walked away and the sound of the broken glass faded into the music, I stayed in the hallway for a while, feeling my heartbeat slowly climb down from my throat back into my chest. The confrontation hadn't gone the way my imagination used to script it. There was no screaming, no scene, no dramatic exit that made everyone freeze. Just two sisters standing in a half-lit corridor, quietly bleeding in ways no one else could see. But underneath the hurt, something else had settled in me. A strange, steady calm. I slipped my hand into my clutch and felt the edges of the thing that had been sitting there all night. Small, quiet, unbearably heavy. The silver box. It looked harmless from the outside. Just a square of polished metal with a white ribbon tied neatly around it, like every other wedding gift piled high on the table inside. If anyone had seen it, they would have thought it held a bracelet, maybe a watch, something pretty and expensive and forgettable. But the weight of it was wrong for jewelry. It was the weight of truth. I'd chosen the box carefully, days before the wedding. Not too big, not too decorative, just simple, reflective, the way I wished my family could be. Inside were printed screenshots, messages, dates, a photo or two that said more about Mark's heart than any vow he'd spoken that afternoon. Proof that the man at the end of the aisle wasn't who everyone believed he was. Proof that Olivia had traded herself for a promise that was already broken. When I'd first found the messages months ago, purely by accident, a notification flashing across my screen when Mark had texted the wrong number, my first reaction hadn't been rage. It had been a cold, sinking familiarity. Of course he wasn't who he pretended to be. Our family had always loved appearances more than truth. Why would this be any different? For a while I thought about ignoring it, letting her live her dream, false as it was, telling myself it wasn't my business. That's what the old me would have done, the quiet Emily, the easy one. But then, one night, I'd pictured my parents' faces. My mother's devotion to this idea of a perfect daughter with a perfect marriage. My father's relief at finally having something shiny to show the world. And suddenly, the lie felt bigger than just Olivia. It was our family's favorite habit. Made flesh. Pretend. Smile. Don't ask questions. And I was so tired of it. So I gathered everything. I printed it out. I put it in the silver box. Not because I wanted to blow up her wedding, but because I knew this lie, if left to grow, would rot all of us from the inside out. Still, I hadn't decided what to do. Not completely. Now, standing alone in that hallway with the bass thumping through the walls, I pulled the box from my clutch and turned it over in my hands. The metal caught the weak light, reflecting my face back at me, warped slightly around the edges. This isn't revenge, I whispered to myself. This is a line. I thought of Maine then. The trip I'd been planning for months, a little rental by the water, 3 days of nothing but waves, coffee, and the sound of my own breathing. I'd been clinging to that vacation like a lifeline, a small promise I'd made only to myself. And then the wedding date was announced. Same weekend. Mom had called first. "Oh, honey, we know you had plans, but it would mean the world if you came. Olivia really wants you there. I'd said, "It's okay, I'll move things around." I didn't tell her that the airline wouldn't refund the ticket, that the deposit on the cabin was non-refundable. I didn't mention the calendar I'd filled with little notes about lighthouses I wanted to see, coffee shops I wanted to try. I just swallowed it, like I always did. Standing there with the silver box, that memory burned a little sharper. Not because of the money or the lost trip, but because of what it symbolized. I had sacrificed the one thing that was purely mine, time alone, time to breathe, to come here and sit by a hallway again. To be reminded in 100 little ways that my place was wherever they needed me to be least visible. That sacrifice didn't make me noble, it just made the pattern undeniable. No more, I thought. I wasn't going to tear Olivia's life down in front of everyone. I wasn't going to march into the ballroom, slam the box onto the cake table, and shout the truth like some cheap movie climax. That would hurt her in a way I couldn't live with, no matter how angry I was. But I also wasn't going to carry their secrets for them anymore. The truth deserved air, even if I only cracked the window. I closed my fingers around the silver box. It felt cooler now, less like a weapon and more like a decision I'd already made. I pictured my parents, my mother smoothing her dress, my father straightening his tie, both of them so invested in the image they'd built around their daughters. Golden Olivia, dependable Emily, one to display, one to lean on. I realized this box wasn't just about Mark, it was about them, about us. It was a mirror I was finally willing to hold up. I slid the box back into my clutch and took a long breath, the kind that reached all the way down, the kind that said, "I am not doing this to destroy you. I am doing this so I don't disappear with you." Inside the ballroom, the DJ's voice rose above the music, calling everyone back to the dance floor. I heard my mother laugh, a high, relieved sound. My father's voice followed, low and proud. I stepped away from the wall. My legs felt steady. My pulse had stopped racing. I wasn't going to run. I wasn't going to explode. I was going to walk, calmly, clearly, toward the only people who needed to see what was in that box. Not the guests. Not Mark. Not even Olivia. My parents. If truth was a gift, then tonight, I was finally ready to unwrap it. But only for the two people who needed it most. The night had turned colder, the kind of chill that seeps into your bones and makes silence feel heavier. Inside the ballroom, laughter and music still rose like waves, muffled by the thick doors that separated me from everything I had already outgrown. In my hands, the silver box gleamed faintly under the hallway light. Its ribbon had loosened, curling like smoke. I traced my thumb along the smooth lid, feeling the weight of it. Not just the proof inside, but everything it represented. This wasn't revenge. It was release. Through the window, I saw my parents at a table near the front. Mom was laughing too loudly, her hand resting on Dad's arm. He nodded at something a guest said, his smile practiced, polite. To everyone else, they looked like the perfect couple, the proud parents of the perfect bride. I walked toward them, the box clutched to my chest. "Emily," Mom said when she saw me, her voice bright with that mix of joy and exhaustion. "Come, sweetheart, have some cake before they cut it. I need to talk to you. Both of you." Her smile faltered. "Now?" Dad frowned. "Can it wait until after?" "It can't," I said quietly. The words carried more finality than I intended. They exchanged a glance, half confusion, half worry, before following me into the corridor. The music faded behind us. The hallway smelled faintly of champagne and winter air. I stopped near a small alcove, where the light from a single chandelier cast soft shadows on the floor. "I want you to have this," I said, holding out the box. Mom looked puzzled. "Is it a gift?" "In a way," I said. It's something I've been carrying for too long. Dad glanced at it warily. What's in there, Emily? The truth. They froze. Mom blinked. Dad's jaw tightened the way it always did when things strayed from the script. I didn't come here to make a scene, I said. I came because I'm done pretending that silence is love. You always taught me to keep the peace, to be the quiet one. But all that did was make me invisible. Mom's brow creased. What are you talking about? I looked her in the eye. Olivia's husband, Mark. He's not who you think he is. This box holds proof. Messages, photos. But it's not just about him. It's about us. About how we keep building our lives on lies because we're too afraid to face the cracks. Her lips parted, but no words came. Dad sighed, already frustrated. Emily, this isn't the right time? I said, cutting him off. It never is it? That's the problem. There's never a good time to be honest in this family. Mom's eyes flicked down to the box in her hands. The silver reflected her face, distorted, trembling. Why now? She whispered. Because I'm tired, I said simply. Tired of watching us pretend. Tired of being the quiet daughter who exists only when someone else needs balance. The air between us grew still. Even the music from the ballroom seemed to hold its breath. I'm not doing this to hurt Olivia, I continued softly. I'm doing it because I love her, because she deserves something real, even if it hurts. We all do. Dad shook his head. This isn't your responsibility, Emily. Maybe not, I said. But neither is carrying everyone's silence. Mom's voice cracked. You think we don't love you? I smiled faintly. I know you do. But you loved me most when I asked for the least. That landed. Her hand trembled against the box. You've always been strong, she murmured, almost to herself. No, I said. I've just been quiet. For a moment, none of us spoke. The faint hum of the heater filled the silence. Mom's eyes darted between me and the box, as though afraid of both. Open it when you're ready, I told her. Not before. And whatever you do next, that's on you, not me. Dad looked at me like he wanted to argue but couldn't find the words. His expression was caught between disbelief and something softer. Regret? Maybe. I stepped back. The corridor felt endless, the air too still. Mom's voice came after me, small and breaking. Emily, where will you go? Home, I said. Wherever that turns out to be. I turned toward the exit. The cold breeze from the open door met me halfway, brushing against my hair, carrying the scent of snow. Behind me, I heard nothing. No apologies, no pleas. Just the faint rustle of ribbon as Mom clutched the box tighter. For once, I didn't wait for them to call me back. Each step away felt like stepping out of something invisible and old, a story that had never really belonged to me. When I reached the doors, I paused. Through the glass, I saw the ballroom glowing, full of people dancing beneath chandeliers. Olivia spun in Mark's arms, her laughter bright but hollow. I didn't hate her. I didn't pity her either. I just hoped that someday she'd find the strength to stop pretending. The same way I finally had. Outside, the snow was falling again. Light, soundless, endless. I walked into it, my breath forming small clouds in the night. Behind me, the celebration carried on. Ahead, the world was quiet. And for the first time in my life, the quiet didn't mean I was forgotten. It meant I was free. It started quietly. From outside the ballroom, I could hear the muffled rhythm of the band, laughter, clinking glasses, a soundtrack to a dream that was already beginning to tear at its seams. I hadn't gone far. I stood near the frost-glazed window at the end of the corridor, staring at my reflection, the woman who had just handed her family the truth and walked away. A few minutes passed before I saw movement inside. My mother and father had opened the box. Even from this distance, I could read it in their faces. Confusion first, then disbelief. Then the kind of silence that's too loud to mistake for anything else. Mom's hand went to her mouth. Dad leaned forward, squinting at the papers, the screenshots, the messages, the photos that didn't need captions. I saw his shoulders slump, his hand drop. The performance had ended. The ballroom kept glowing around them, unaware. I watched as Mom whispered something to him, her lips trembling. He looked at her, not angry, not yet, but with the haunted stillness of a man realizing the story he's been living was never real. Then, suddenly, they stood. Guests turned their heads as my parents moved through the crowd, slow, deliberate steps that carried decades of denial in each stride. Mom's hand clutched the silver box like a relic. They reached the head table. Olivia turned, her smile faltering at the sight of them. I couldn't hear their words, but I saw the exchange unfold in the choreography of shock. My mother placed the box in front of her. Dad said something, quiet but sharp enough to make Olivia's face drain of color. Mark looked confused at first, then defensive, the way people do when the truth gets too close. Mom's voice rose, not shouting, but firm, trembling with heartbreak more than fury. Olivia shook her head, pleading. Mark tried to interject, but my father cut him off with a single gesture that could silence an entire room. The music stopped. The band fell silent mid-note. The entire ballroom froze. And for the first time in my life, the Walker family, polished, practiced, picture-perfect, was utterly, painfully human. I pressed a hand to the glass, my breath fogging the window. Watching it unfold didn't bring satisfaction. It brought ache, deep and strange, like watching a wound you've hidden for years finally bleed in daylight. Mom's knees buckled. Someone rushed forward, one of Olivia's bridesmaids maybe, but Dad caught her before she fell. His face was pale, his mouth moving soundlessly. When he finally spoke, the words reached me faintly, like echoes carried through water. We made our other daughter feel worthless, just to keep this illusion alive. Olivia's eyes widened. Her lips parted as if to say something, but the words didn't come. She stood frozen, her perfect dress suddenly too heavy, her perfect world collapsing in front of an audience that didn't know whether to clap or run. Mark's face hardened. He said something to her, then turned away, his jaw tight, his eyes darting toward the exit. And then, like a fragile piece of glass finally giving way, everything shattered. Literally. The frame of a glass photo, their engagement picture, fell from the display table and hit the floor. The sound was sharp, final, slicing through the stillness like thunder. A few people gasped. Others whispered. The wedding coordinator looked ready to faint. I stepped back from the window. My reflection merged with the scene inside. My pale face overlapping the chaos. For a moment, I couldn't tell which side of the glass I belonged to anymore. Mom's tears came quietly, but not out of humiliation. They came from recognition. From seeing, maybe for the first time, what she'd chosen not to see for decades. Dad placed a trembling hand on her shoulder. His expression wasn't anger. It was grief. A grief born not from losing reputation, but from realizing what his silence had cost. They had loved us in their own way, in the only way they knew how. But love without truth is just performance. And the performance had finally ended. Olivia crumpled into a chair, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Mark was gone, his empty champagne glass the only trace he'd left behind. I didn't move. I didn't run in to comfort her. There was nothing I could say that wouldn't sound like victory. And this was no victory. It was revelation. Sharp, necessary, but merciless. Through the glass, Mom looked up. For a brief second, her gaze found me. She didn't wave. She didn't call out. She just looked. And in that look, I saw it. Understanding. Apology. Love. Stripped of performance. She nodded once. So small. So heavy. I nodded back. Then I turned, stepping away from the window. My heels echoed down the corridor. Steady. Certain. Behind me, I heard the sounds of chaos softening, voices turning to murmurs, the music trying timidly to start again, guests pretending to recover from what they'd just witnessed. But there was no going back to before. The truth, once spoken, even silently, changes the air. When I reached the main doors, the cold air rushed in, sharp and clean. Vermont's night sky stretched wide and endless, snow falling like fragments of forgiveness. I closed my eyes and let it land on my skin. The silence didn't hurt anymore. It felt like peace. Inside, my family's world had finally cracked open. And out here, for the first time, I could breathe without guilt. I didn't know what would come next. Anger, distance, maybe even healing, but it would be real. And real, after all these years, was enough. I didn't stay to see how it ended. When truth hits, it doesn't explode. It seeps, quietly and completely. I could feel it bleeding through the walls of that ballroom as I walked out, heels echoing against marble. Behind me, the perfect wedding was beginning to rot from the inside out. Outside, Vermont air stung like a slap. The snow had melted into uneven piles, gray at the edges. My breath fogged against the cold as I crossed the parking lot, the glow of the ballroom flickering behind me like a false star. I sat in the car, hands on the steering wheel, staring at my reflection in the windshield. My heart still hammered, but the fear was gone. Only exhaustion remained. Then the phone started buzzing. Mom, Dad, Olivia. Their names flashed again and again, the vibrations rattling against the cup holder like a heartbeat that wasn't mine. For a second, instinct pulled at me, the old reflex to answer, explain, smooth everything over. But I didn't move. I turned the phone face down and let it ring. For once, their panic wasn't my responsibility. I started the engine. The headlights sliced through the dark, cutting a pale tunnel of road ahead. In the rearview mirror, the venue shrank. Just another building pretending to be something beautiful. As I drove, the phone buzzed endlessly. I imagined what was happening inside. My mother opening the silver box, my father leaning closer, disbelief turning into silence. Olivia's face draining of color as realization hit. And my father, finally whispering the truth I'd waited my whole life to hear. We made one daughter feel invisible, just to keep the other perfect. The thought didn't bring triumph, only ache. Because even when justice arrives, it never feels the way you dream it will. It just hurts less than the lie. The calls kept coming, texts stacked up. Then slowly, they stopped. The last vibration faded into the hum of the road. The silence that followed wasn't the old kind, not the lonely kind that used to make me feel small. This silence was clean. It made space. Snow flurries drifted across the headlights. The wipers kept time like a heartbeat. I focused on breathing, slow, even, deliberate. Each inhale felt like reclaiming something that had been borrowed for too long. I thought about the little girl I used to be, sitting on the stairs, hearing my parents say, "Emily's fine on her own." And maybe I was. Maybe I'd been surviving on my own for years. But surviving isn't the same as living. By the time I crossed into Maine, the horizon had softened. The sky was bruised gray, rain misting against the windshield. The radio stayed off. I didn't need music to fill the quiet. The quiet itself was enough. The phone buzzed once more. "Mom, call me when you're safe." I powered it off. Not from anger, but peace. Portland greeted me with that familiar smell, coffee, salt, and rain. Streets glistened with the reflection of streetlights, and shop windows glowed faintly in the dawn. I parked outside my apartment, turned off the car, and sat there in stillness. The silence felt earned. Inside, everything was exactly as I'd left it. A blanket on the couch, a mug in the sink, a book half open on the table. Nothing had changed, and yet, everything had. I dropped my bag, kicked off my shoes, and went straight to the window. The city below looked washed clean, ordinary, honest. People hurried through the drizzle, carrying coffee, chasing buses. I pressed my palm against the glass and watched my reflection blur in the mist. For the first time, I didn't look like a shadow in someone else's story. I looked real. The tears came quietly, not out of grief, but release. Years of pretending, of smiling through dismissal, drained out of me. They weren't bitter tears, just truth, leaving the body. When they stopped, I made coffee. The kettle's hum, the smell of roasted beans, the steam rising, it all felt grounding, human. I sat on the floor, mug warm between my hands, and watched daylight settle over the rooftops. Somewhere, my parents were probably staring at that silver box, wondering what pieces could be saved. Somewhere, Olivia was learning what I already knew, that truth doesn't destroy you, it frees you in the ugliest way possible. There would be fallout, conversations, apologies, maybe, or silence. But for once, I wasn't waiting for any of it. I had walked out before the ceiling fell, and now I was standing in the open air, breathing, bruised, alive. The collapse had already happened. What came after was mine to build. I leaned my head against the window and whispered softly, like a prayer only I needed to hear. I'm still here. The city outside stirred. A car horn, the sound of footsteps, the faint scent of morning rain. And for the first time in my life, the quiet didn't mean I'd been forgotten. It meant I was finally free. Morning came soft and gray, curling through my window like the first deep breath after too many held in. I hadn't slept much, but it didn't matter. The silence in my apartment wasn't heavy anymore. It was whole. I sat by the window with a half-drunk cup of coffee, watching the drizzle paint faint lines across the glass. Portland moved at its usual pace below, people heading to work, dogs tugging at leashes, the world continuing as if nothing extraordinary had happened, and maybe, to everyone else, nothing had. But inside me, something enormous had shifted. The night before had ended one version of my life, the one where I existed in the margins, holding my breath while everyone else's stories filled the room. Now there was only this: stillness, coffee, and a strange new quiet that didn't ache anymore. I got up, pulled on a sweater, and walked across the apartment. My suitcase still sat by the door where I'd dropped it last night. The airline tag for Portland, Burlington, was still attached. A one-way trip to the wedding that had turned into an ending. I crouched beside it, unzipped the side pocket, and pulled out the folded envelope I'd left there weeks ago. Main cabin reservation, non-refundable. I'd almost forgotten it existed. A faint smile tugged at my lips. Maybe that was the universe's way of reminding me that not all plans were meant to be canceled, only postponed. An hour later, I was on the road again. The rain followed me part of the way up the coast, the windshield blurring the world into watercolor streaks. The closer I got to the ocean, the lighter it became. Gray clouds thinning into pale blue, the smell of salt threading through the air. By noon, I was pulling into a small gravel driveway lined with pines. The cabin looked exactly like its photos. Small, quiet, a few steps from the edge of the sea. The kind of place where no one would ask questions. Inside, it smelled of cedar and something faintly sweet, like old books left near an open window. I set my bag down and opened the curtains. The Atlantic stretched out before me, endless, indifferent, and perfect. For a while I just stood there, listening to the rhythm of the waves. It wasn't loud or dramatic, just constant, steady. The sound of something that has always known how to begin again. I made tea, wrapped myself in a blanket, and stepped onto the porch. The wind tangled my hair, cold but alive. I felt small in the best way. Not invisible, just human. That's when my phone vibrated. I hadn't turned it on since leaving Vermont. My heart jumped, but I forced a deep breath and swiped the screen. 17 missed calls, 9 voicemails, but only one message mattered. Mom, Emily, I've read everything. I don't know where to start, but I want to. I won't make excuses. You were right. We didn't see you. We were so busy protecting our idea of family that we forgot to protect the people inside it. I'm sorry for the hallway seat. I'm sorry for the silence. If you ever want to come home, the door is open. I stared at the message for a long time, the words blurring as my eyes filled. It wasn't a grand apology. It didn't erase anything. But it was real. Raw, imperfect, and true. And truth, I'd learned, was the only thing worth rebuilding from. I typed for a while, deleting sentences that sounded too polished, too defensive, too safe. In the end, I wrote only this. Me. I need time. But I hear you. The door is open. I pressed send, then set the phone face down on the table. The tide was rising, white foam licking the edges of the shore. I watched the water move, back and forth, endless. Every wave erasing what came before it. Every return slightly different from the last. That was healing, I realized. Not the absence of pain, but its transformation. The moment when the hurt stopped defining you and started teaching you how to live differently. As the light began to fade, I walked down to the beach. The sand was cold under my bare feet, damp and gritty. I picked up a small stone and turned it over in my hand. Smooth, solid, unremarkable. I threw it into the sea and watched the ripples spread outward until they disappeared. That's what truth did. It made ripples. You couldn't control how far they went or what they touched. But once they were set in motion, you couldn't pull them back. I sat there until the sun began to sink, painting the sky in slow strokes of rose and gray. The air grew colder, and I wrapped my arms around my knees, letting the ocean wind fill my lungs. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for someone else's permission to feel okay. I didn't need to be forgiven. I didn't need to be chosen. I just needed to be free. And I was. Voiceover, closing monologue. I used to think healing meant hearing the words "I'm sorry," but it doesn't. Healing begins the moment you stop asking others to see your worth and start seeing it yourself. I thought I wanted revenge. For every slight, every moment I was forgotten. But the truth is, revenge is easy. What's harder is choosing peace when the world has given you every reason to be bitter. That night, I didn't destroy my family. I just stopped letting them destroy me. The seat by the hallway, the place they left me, it wasn't exile. It was the beginning of freedom. And if you've ever been left there too, remember this. The door isn't locked. You can stand up. You can walk out. And when you do, the silence waiting for you on the other side isn't loneliness. It's the sound of your own life finally beginning. The waves kept rolling. Somewhere behind them, the past was dissolving, soft and slow. The world didn't change. Only my place in it did. And for the first time, that was enough. When the waves finally calmed that evening, Emily sat in silence, feeling the last of the day's light rest on her skin. There were no grand endings, no music, no applause, no neat redemption. Just the soft hum of the sea, and a woman who had learned that freedom doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. She didn't win or lose. She simply reclaimed what had always been hers: the right to exist without apology, the right to walk away without hating anyone for the path they chose to stay on. Revenge, she realized, wasn't about breaking others, it was about refusing to break yourself anymore. Forgiveness wasn't a gift she owed them, it was the peace she decided to keep for herself. And maybe that's how every story like this ends, not with a perfect closure, but with a quiet acceptance that life will go on, softer, truer, and more hers than it's ever been. Maybe you've been there too, sitting by your own hallway seat, waiting to be seen. If you have, tell me. Would you have stayed and kept smiling, or would you have walked out into the night like she did? Because sometimes, the bravest thing you can do isn't to fight back, it's to leave, and let your silence be the loudest truth they ever hear.